All right, we're recording. Welcome everybody to our adult ed presentation for April 26th, 2020. It's a wonderful day for adult education, and we have Carrie Sanders here presenting. Carrie Sanders is going to be presenting on the fashion industry and environmentalism, the human and environmental impacts of fast fashion. Did I get that even close to correct? Yes. Carrie Sanders is a member at Covenant and does a million other things around Madison, including faculty at Edgewood. And maybe she can tell us a little bit more about her background, because I should have this in front of me, but I don't. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie.
Okay, thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate the opportunity to share about something that has elevated itself pretty high up in my consciousness in terms of things that I feel called to respond to and take action about in the social justice and environment category, that intersection. So the way the presentation is going to work today is that I'm going to share my screen, of course, and I'm going to try and work in a couple short videos. By short, I mean 1 and 2 minutes long. I'm hoping that works for you, and if it doesn't, we will just make do and move on. And I hope to speak to you for about 25 minutes, and then I'm really hoping that together we can discuss this issue. I know many of us are coming to this from different points of understanding around it. Some of us have, maybe no idea what fast fashion is or why does it matter to me. Others of us have been tuned into this for a while. So I invite all of those perspectives, and I really just invite us into a time of curiosity, learning, and then asking ourselves, is there something here that I can do on an individual, an organizational, and or community or global level? So that's kind of where we wanted to start. As Jeff mentioned, I am on faculty with the Edgewood College Sustainability and Sustainability Leadership graduate degree program. I've been there for 6 years, and I work with students all the time about their social innovation projects. And this issue, this area around the fashion industry and its exploitative process, exploitivity, whatever, to humans and planet is just, it is my social innovation project, as it were. So I am thrilled to be able to share this with you. And I want to point out that maybe not so coincidentally, we are at the very last day of an annual event called Fashion Revolution Week. And this is the week that was started in 2014, a year after the Rana Plaza tragedy in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where over 1,100 factory workers died. And they died for fashion, and mostly for Western consumption. So I'm going to start with that story, but let you know that you are in the midst of a global movement right now as we speak around a revolution in these practices to make them less exploitive, not exploitive, and to bring social justice to this important area. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. And let me see, Jeff, I'm just checking in with Jeff. Jeff, are you seeing my screen? Thumbs up? Okay.
I am indeed, yes, thank you.
So the picture you see in front of you is Rana Plaza. I had just mentioned Rana Plaza, and on the 24th of April, 2013, this building collapsed. It was an 8-story building. It's located in Dhaka, Bangladesh, which is one of the epicenters of very low wage textile and garment workers. That's where they're located predominantly across the globe, predominantly because of the cheap labor that happens there. This disaster killed at least 1,132 people and injured more than 2,500. Only 5 months earlier, at least 112 workers were killed due to another factory destruction like this, where they had been trapped inside, both in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The thing that's so upsetting about this is that both of these tragedies were 100% avoidable. Workers at Rana Plaza were forced to enter the damaged building on April 24th, 2013, and the day of the tragedy. And they had complained the day before about sounds coming from cracks in the building, which then collapsed on them. This tragedy actually really focused the world's attention on the garment industry in Bangladesh. And it has really made this industry in Bangladesh, which is still really centered in Bangladesh to this day, has made many women and their family, their family breadwinners. And this has been an economic lifeline for many people. But these gains, and I just want to point to both sides of this story, have come to an enormous cost to workers, including their lives. So at the time of this tragedy, very few workers received fair wages. Very few received fair and decent working conditions. There was no right to unionize without retribution. And something about, so since this, the government and many major brands that have sourced from Bangladesh have taken some steps to correct these wrongs, but others have resisted. And the thing is, the demand, and we're going to talk about that, but the demand of an insatiable fashion industry, which is predominantly promoted by Western consumption, the demand of that have forced garment workers to keep working. And here's the thing, folks. The ugly truth is that many of us own articles of clothing that were produced in this factory. It's quite certain. Walmart had contracts here. Gap had contracts here. H&M had contracts here. And the thing is that they didn't know. Like actually Gap and Walmart and some of these mega H&M, mega fashion houses actually had no idea where they had to go through the rubble to find their tags to link the companies to the makers. And this is where we get this idea of who made my clothes. Okay, let's see. I am wanting to shift. Here we go. So as we get started, I just want to talk about some words to think about because, of course, this is Covenant Presbyterian Church. We are interested in learning about God's love and living God's love. And so there's a couple verses that have been really placed on my heart as I think about this presentation today and as I think about this issue more largely, which is John 15:12, which is to love one another as I have loved you. Okay, love one another as I have loved you. And when we think about that with those who have touched our clothing, working in indecent, forced, and exploitive conditions, how are we showing that love? How are we exemplifying this from John 15:12? Second thing is this verse from Jeremiah, which is, it will be made a wasteland, parched and desolate before me. The whole land will be laid waste because, and I highlighted this, there is no one who cares. So that is really why I have become quite a bit of an activist around this issue, is because I feel that if people can begin to understand what is going on with fast fashion and why does it matter to me, then we can begin to care. And when we begin to care, we begin to take action that creates a different outcome. The third little saying I wanted to share with you is one of the most amazing quotes that I reference frequently in my own consciousness. I have it on my wall in my office, which I haven't been to in a while, which is, we start to die the day that we become silent about things that matter to us. And this is by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. So those are kind of three things that inform where I'm going today with this talk. So what is fast fashion? What is it? This is a definition that I really like, and this is an influencer for good. She's called the Eco Warrior Princess. She is in Australia, but I really like this term, and it is that fast fashion is a term to describe the speed at which fashion designs move from design concept to fashion product available for purchase. It's usually characterized by high volume, low margin, fast pace, cheap and disposable items. It moves quickly from consumer to garbage. And so I've highlighted some words there that I feel really exemplify the problem that we're dealing with here, which is cheap and disposable and speed. Okay. The upper picture there is the protests after the Rana Plaza tragedy. And as you can see, there's a very important sign here, which I think really kind of exemplifies, again, why is this important to us? No one should die for fashion. And that is exactly what is happening and what did happen at Rana Plaza. So here's just another short chart, excuse me, just kind of giving you a sense of traditional versus fast fashion. So I'm happy to say that I have some traditional pieces in my closet, and those came from my grandma, who just passed about a year ago at age 93, and she gave me these beautiful manufactured in America textiles, garments that have, one of them is from 1942, and it's just beautiful. She kept it until, she was kept it and was wearing it until 2019. This is not how the world operates at this time. What we have is a typical fast fashion where we have 50 cycles per year. And when we say that, it's just like, well, I don't know if we all are shopping at, well, nobody's shopping in stores right now, but Zara, H&M, on and on, you would notice that they actually have about a cycle of one per week. One per week, they are changing out the vast majority of the clothes in their stores. And that is how quickly fashion is moving. And that's kind of the idea of fast fashion. So I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of who made my clothes. And that is really kind of the rallying question around a fashion revolution, is who is behind the clothes that we so cheaply purchase, and by we I mean Western society, we so cheaply purchase and we so quickly dispose of. So again, I'm going back to kind of the anchor verse here for me, which is John 15:12. We have to know our neighbors, and this disconnection between the conditions and the people and the lives who are behind our clothing, this disconnection creates kind of a barrier in our consciousness. It can, and I will admit to it as well, that I don't need to worry about this. This is in Bangladesh, for goodness sake. I had to remind myself, where is Bangladesh? Okay, on the map. And I'm sure I'm not the only one on this call who isn't immediately familiar with where Dhaka, Bangladesh is. It's so far removed. It's out of sight. It's out of mind. And when we are in there to purchase an item, we want it quick. We want it to meet a need. We want it to be on trend, maybe. There's different reasons. But just because we don't understand what's going on there is no reason not to engage in this issue. So as I mentioned earlier, after the Rana Plaza tragedy, people had to dig through the rubble looking for clothing labels in order to figure out which brands were sourcing from that particular factory. In some cases, it took weeks for these brands. These are big brands like Walmart, Gap, on, which I have plenty of that in my closet, I will admit. But it took weeks for them to determine why their labels were found in the ruins and what sort of purchasing agreements they had with the suppliers. This happens because there is so much segmentation in this globalized fashion industry, and it is so we reduce the cost of the labor around this because there is this understanding that we're not going to pay more in the store. And again, I'm talking from my own context right now. We're not going to pay more in the store, and so therefore the work and the lives of those who have produced our clothing have to be cheaper and far away, not part of our consciousness. So who are these garment workers? Who are they? So 1 in 6 people globally work in the garment industry. There are roughly 40 million garment workers in the world today, many of whom do not share the same rights and protections as we do in the West. Garment workers disproportionately affect women ages 18 to 34, and they are some of the lowest paid workers in the world. And roughly 85% of garment workers are women, and the average wage and this is actually a high because there are many, many factories that are below this average. The average is $3 a day. So if you think about this, you think about buying your $16, t-shirt from Old Navy or wherever you choose to purchase it. Think about how many of those t-shirts are getting produced on the day and who is producing that. And they're producing those hundreds, right, a day for about $3 a day, average. So, okay, so with that, I want to just share a 2-minute video. And this is, I'm sharing this because I think it really kind of wraps up in a different way with some of the images of things that I've talked about already, this issue. And this is the official trailer from the movie, The True Cost. So I am going to go back to sharing my screen, and I will optimize this for video clip, and we will together watch this. Hold on, and show. We'll go to this, and we'll go to this, and let's go for it.
We communicate who we are through clothing. It is fundamentally a part of what we wish to communicate about ourselves.
We used to have a system, a fashion system. That has absolutely nothing to do with the fashion industry today. It has been reinvented.
It's based on materialism. The problem is that comes at a really high price.
Garment factory collapsed, killing more than 1,000.
Clashes between clothes factory workers and riot police in Cambodia.
Last November, 112 people were killed in another major factory fire. 30,000 Chinese workers have been on strike.
Garment workers in Bangladesh will paying the price for cheap clothing.
Well, the promise of globalization was that it was going to be a win-win, that consumers in the rich world would get cheaper goods and people in the poorer parts of the world would get jobs, and that those jobs would give them an opportunity to work their way out of poverty.
This enormous, rapacious industry that is generating so much profit, why is it that it is unable to support millions of its workers properly?
The actual business model is completely unsustainable. Unless you change that model, you can't change anything.
When everything is concentrated on making profits, what you see is that human rights, the environment, workers' rights get lost.
My God, we can do better than this.
Okay, so that was one of my recommendations for everyone is if you haven't seen that movie, please watch it as soon as possible. I don't think it's any longer on Netflix, but it is on Amazon Prime, and you can also rent it from Amazon or directly from the True Cost website. So I'm going back to my presentation, but I, again, wanted to share that with you because it really, okay, here we are. It really summarizes, I think, in a very powerful way, some of the things that I'm trying to say. And that movie was presented in 2017, I believe. Something that you saw from that movie that also very much impacts both the exploitation of people and planet involved in the fashion industry is our consumption issues. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. In 2014, just 6 short years ago, 2014, we bought in 2014, which is when this was done by McKinsey & Company and the World Resources Institute, the average consumer bought 60% more clothing in 2014 than in 2000. And this is a very important piece. We kept each garment half as long. What is going on here? Like, what contributed to that swing? It's a huge swing between 2000 and 2014 around consumption. And the average consumer, this is a global average consumer, but kept each garment half as long. The average time an American keeps a garment is 5 months. Not like my grandma who kept it since 1942. The other thing is we consume and we dispose. So again, that's that piece around fast fashion. We quickly dispose. So here are, again, this is a wonderful source of information, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. If you want to check it out, I do encourage her as a resource. But 1 garbage truck of clothes are burned and landfilled every second. Every second. We generate enough waste to fill 1.5 Empire State Buildings every single day. And then in 2019, we created enough clothing waste to fill Sydney Harbor. I mean, so you can just see kind of the disposal and the consumption that is happening. So when we talk about this fast fashion economy, which is built on an insatiable, as I said earlier, an insatiable sort of desire, want, whatever it is, drive for clothing, consumption, the acceleration of garment production is rooted in maximizing profit for the clothing companies. And there are just a few that are very large, and then I'm going to talk about some of the newer ones, while minimizing the purchase price of garments for consumers. So you can see there's kind of 2 things happening here. We're maximizing profit, we're minimizing purchase price. And so what happens, what has to give, right, when we are maximizing profits and minimizing purchase price? It's our labor, and it's the resources and how we're exploiting ecological resources to get the materials for our work. So the question that I have here on the bottom, and this is a slide that I present often to classes, which is, if we kind of understand that cost between to do this, maximize profits and minimize purchase price, who is paying the true cost for fast fashion? And the Rana Plaza example shows you that there are low-wage, unprotected workers who are paying the true cost for fast fashion, as well as the planet. I want to share just another minute clip here. So I will do that. I will hopefully just keep us here. Oh goodness, where did it go? Oh no. Okay. Let's see. Let's see if I can do this. I might need my technological guru, my 13-year-old.
Can we go, please? Go, 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 go. Shop, 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 shop.
Black Friday shopping mania is still playing out tonight at malls across America.
In some places across this country tonight, it's as if someone announced we're in danger of running out of stuff, and those who need stuff had better go out and buy it now because it's going away forever.
Walmart doing more than 10 million transactions in the first 4 hours of the frenzy. A record 15,000 people at Macy's in New York City. Shoppers hung tough.
Black Friday will be the single largest day of the retail year. Certainly in the case of Macy's, we'll do more business on this day than on any other day of the year.
Nation, this orgy of Christmas shopping proves America is back. We are once again, yes. We are once again spending money we don't have on things we don't need to give to people we don't like. Yeah. USA! 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 USA!
I've kept my grip so tight. I won't let anyone get in my way. I want beautiful things, golden
Okay, so that's the end of my clips for today, but back to this. Okay. So again, that's just another scene from The True Cost, but I think it does a really satirical and I think pretty honest way of showing where we are with this mass consumption and who is really hurting because of that choice. The next part of the presentation is really the focus on, we talked about the exploitation of humans and people. Now I want to talk about the exploitation of environment, which are closely linked. So the composition of some of our garments, a lot of our garments are plastic-based, and these are based in petroleum. So we have 342 million barrels of oil each year used for things such as polyester and those sort of things. Yes, and then polyester production, extremely carbon intensive. As you can see, I mean, look at this. Polyester production for textiles in 2015 released about 706 billion kilograms of greenhouse gases, which is equivalent to 185 coal-fired power plants annual emissions. So, I mean, have you ever thought about your fashion? Which again, I'm not throwing shame at anyone right now, because I mean, we could go look at my closet right here and you would see that I have plenty of polyester and other sort of synthetic materials in there. But have you ever connected that what's hanging in your closet to this emissions? It is connected, and it has an intense impact on our environment. You can see just some of the, again, this is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, again, wonderful resource for us as we explore this issue, but you can see where there's just so many emissions throughout the supply chain, whether it's fiber production, clothing production, how we use our clothing, our utilization. So you can see there's a little washing machine there, and then how we dispose of our clothing. And we talked about already, you know, annually we put enough clothing in the landfill or burn it to fill Sydney Harbor. So the thing is that the world now consumes about 80 billion new pieces of clothing every single year. This is about 400% more than the amount we consumed just 2 decades ago. 400% more clothing consumed globally than we did just 2 decades ago. So this is a recent problem. The average American, and that's us, now generates 82 pounds of textile waste a year. And this adds up for the US alone. It's even hard to even really imagine this, but 11 million tons of textile waste from the US alone. So there's been a shift around our view of clothing from something that we hung on to for a long time, like my grandma's jacket that's so beautiful from 1942, to something that we keep for about 5 months in America. The other thing I want to point out is this slide here, which I'm sure you've been looking at. This is from the National Geographic. We have 2,700 liters required to make one cotton shirt. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about cotton here too. This is enough water for one person to drink for 2.5 years. Think about like all the work that we think about with getting water to people who don't have it, clean water to people who don't have it. And here we are using water as a resource so that, and I'll use myself, I can go to Old Navy and buy a t-shirt for $5. Okay, I mean, this is what we've got going on. So I'm trying to create that connection for all of us. I do want to talk a little bit about cotton as well, and that's not related to this slide necessarily, but cotton is extremely important for us to be thinking about here because cotton represents nearly half of the total fiber used to make clothing today. So when we think about the supply chain involved in this industry, we should know that more than 90% of this cotton is now genetically modified using vast amounts of water and chemicals. And this is something that is highlighted in the video. It is absolutely heartbreaking. But 250,000 Indian cotton farmers have killed themselves in the last 15 years. And the research on this from some of our NGOs that study these things, including the Human Rights Watch, has said that this is a big part of this is a result of going into debt by buying genetically modified cotton seeds. And I will go ahead and name the biggest purveyor of genetically modified cotton seeds is Monsanto. So this hurts our farmers. This hurts our people working in factories. All of it. You can just see the trauma throughout the entire supply chain. We're on consumption again. But this consumption is hurting our earth. So you can see this is, if we continue to consume as we have been, our resource consumption, if we continue business as usual, our resource consumption as a globe, this is global, will be 3 times what it is in 2000 by 2050. So again, I'm trying to kind of paint a connection that our clothing consumption is part of that. So of course, this presentation would not be complete if I didn't talk about COVID-19 and its cost to fast fashion. So right now, I mentioned early on that there's an argument out there, and I think, maybe there's some truth in it, is that as of all the jobs that people can have in underdeveloped countries, is working in a garment factory the worst? At least it's an economic opportunity, an opportunity to earn a wage for women. Okay, so that argument gets made quite a bit. So here we are now at COVID-19 when H&M is closed, Forever 21 has declared bankruptcy, on and on. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these clothing retailers, these brands we'll call them, they don't necessarily connect to the factories that are producing their stuff. So the cost of Bangladesh alone is estimated to be over $2 billion. And it is the manufacturers, it is the factories who bear all the risks, as mostly, and this is how the contracts work, they're not allowed to invoice H&M or Gap or whatever until the goods have been shipped. We've got buyers abandoning suppliers. We have factories shutting down. And as of this morning, I really follow this issue closely. It was 1 million garment workers unemployed in Bangladesh at this time. So you can see, this impacts fast fashion. And the question now is really, how can we emerge from this crisis, this economic crisis, even at $3 a day? This is a significant economic crisis for factory workers and garment workers. How can we emerge differently and not exploit our labor force and not exploit our planet post-COVID in the fast fashion world? So there's that. I will just leave this slide up, but I just wanted to, let's just see, I want to make sure I've covered everything. No, I'm not. We're going to move on to things you can do right now, because this is a huge issue. And so I like to leave us with some tangible things that we can do right now. And these I've collected over the years, and it's also things that I try to practice in my own life. So number one, something that I do, hopefully try to every single day when I select my clothing, is I check the label. I'm checking for a couple things. One is, what kind of stuff is in the composition of this article of clothing? Are there synthetics? Are there things that have harmed the world, the planet? And then I touch that label and I say a prayer for all the hands that have touched this clothing that ended it up into my closet. I try to connect closely with those who are involved in that. Another thing you can do is always buy used. Always buy used first. I highlighted buy less. So that gets to that whole chapter of our presentation today around consumption. We want to be buying less. There are opportunities to do clothing swaps. There are rental clothing services, which I have sampled and tried out. That one is called Rent the Runway. And then buy less clothing, but buy high quality, like my grandma did in 1942. Buy something that you can give to your grandchild, 50, 60 years later. Is that possible? Also, mending and repairing. Again, this stops the disposable piece of it and says, what can I learn how to darn socks? Can I learn how to, whatever it is, put on a button? What can I do to mend or repair the things I have? Wash less. I will tell you, my 16-year-old is very happy about this suggestion because he's in charge of his laundry. So washing less really does help the planet. Thrifting smarter. I enjoy very much, and this is one of the things, I know, Jeff, you mentioned you're sad about not going to libraries. I'm sad about that too. I'm also very sad that I don't get to go to St. Vinny's and do some great thrifting, because I have built like a little community there. I just love spending time there. And the thing is, though, we all need to be aware, about 10% of the clothes that people donate to charity or thrift stores actually get sold, or actually continue on in this cycle of clothing. So we have to be thrifting smarter, meaning when we purchase things in the first place, that it's something that will get picked up by the next person when we thrift. You can go on to fashionrevolution.org and look at their manifesto around some of these things. It's a wonderful piece, and I just love that website. I think it's outstanding. And again, it grew up out of the Rana Plaza tragedy where we started today. I encourage you to watch True Cost, even if you have watched it before. I have probably watched it no less than 6 or 8 times. Watch it again, and watch it with someone that you can discuss, because you need to see it. As my friend who has started a sustainable brand says, you cannot unsee what you learn. You cannot unlearn, you cannot be unaware once you see the true cost. So I highly, highly recommend that. There's an opportunity to read the Garment Workers' Diaries, again, on the Fashion Revolution website. And then something that I'm working on right now is to build what I call a connected closet over time. And that gets to that, okay, do I know where my clothes came from? Do I know who made my clothes, which is back here, this whole thing? Who made my clothes? Do I know that? And over time, and again, I'm not advocating for going out and buying a bunch of things. The most sustainable thing you can do is wear what you have, right? The most sustainable thing you can do is wear what you have. But as things get old, as things, no longer work, I want to build a closet that is connected to these wonderful people who do make the clothes, and so that we can honor them with our consumption choices. So that's what I wanted to say. I believe I have just a couple minutes here for conversation, and I would really, really like to hear what people's reactions are, and if you have any ideas.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I really appreciate all of that. That was wonderful. The first thing I would love is, could you drop a link in the chat with the videos and the websites and all that, so that way people who are on the call can find that stuff?
Yes.
Awesome. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, Carrie, thank you. That was a really powerful presentation, and it made me tear up to watch that video. I think I look at some of those photos and I think it must be from a different world, but then I could probably, as you say, look in my closet and see things and go, oops, yeah, I'm there too. I bought this stuff unaware. So thank you for that. And thank you for offering up ways that we can make a change, because that's important too. Appreciate it.
Carrie, I have a comment. I love to thrift, and I wouldn't say I'm perfect at using always used clothing, but it's something that I enjoy to do. Where I struggle is finding clothes for my children. Mm-hmm. And, just they wear out things easier. And, we pick up t-shirts at Old Navy. So I really started, especially that description of thinking about when I pick up that t-shirt at Old Navy for my kids, because it's easy and I know they're going to grow out of it in 6 months. How much water consumption that takes up. I'm wondering if you have any things that you and Scott have done with your family in terms of looking at kids' clothing.
Yeah, and especially depending on their age, right? So I have a 5-year-old who, I mean, is putting holes in her pants all the time. I mean, and I'm sure you get some of that too, Jeff, with Irene. I mean, they're just running so hard, and you want them to. You want to enjoy things, and you don't want them to enjoy life, and you don't want them to be worrying about ruining their clothes, right? So with her, though, I have found, I think it's called the Children's Boutique on Odana and Whitney. And they go up to size 12. So I don't know. I think your girls might be a little taller than that, Jenny. But I found some like resale children's boutiques. And that's fun. I enjoy that. And then Scott has been shopping for the boys at St. Vinny's and the various Goodwill and stuff for, years. And
the best one was Savers. That was on the in West Town Mall, but it's not there anymore. But there you could actually really fill up the wardrobe. And at St. Vinny's, it's not as easy. I understand what you're saying, Jenny. It's harder in certain scenarios.
It is harder. And so what I find to be useful is I make my trips to St. Vinny's pretty regular. I may be there like when we're not, quarantining and loving our neighbor that way. When we are able to be out and about, I'm there almost every week. And I have a list. I have a list on my phone, and I need joggers for the boys. And most weeks they're not going to be there, but some weeks they are. So I just make it like part of my regular routine that I am checking these places. And usually I luck out if I don't need it immediately, which as busy moms and busy parents, I understand needing to go to Old Navy too.
Happily Ever After Children's Boutique is the name of the one on Whitney and Odana. That's they've got really good boots for the winter too, if you're looking for any. And really and truly, Carrie, here's what I'll say. The hardest thing on my clothes has been my knees. The knees of my pants with a toddler have just been wearing out all the time, crawling around. Steve, you had a question a little bit ago. Can I come back to you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I like to keep it simple, and I'd like to really put this question out to all of you. So how can we think about clothes purchasing and just general, getting garments for ourselves and our family to wear? With those, I think of them as 4 questions. The first one is refuse. The second one is reduce. The third one is reuse, and then the last one is recycle. So Carrie's talked about refusing, to buy clothes from stores like Walmart or Gap, where a lot of their products are made in third world countries. Reducing, reusing our clothes, selling clothes to garment store, to thrift stores, and or not selling, but giving stuff to Goodwill and to Salvation Army. And so do others have ideas as to putting it in that framework of what they're doing or what we could do to do better when it comes to clothes management?
Well, and I just want to clarify, I think that's wonderful, Steve. I want to clarify too with I hate to call out brands, and I could go, we could have a whole, month's worth of like which brands work, which don't. Yeah. But for example, I just bought a pair of Lululemon leggings, which they have terrible labor practices, but I know that I will keep those for 10 years. And so when we purchase things, are we purchasing at a quality that we know, it's not going to be in the garbage here in 5 months? And so, there's a balance, and I want to emphasize that there's balance, but it's raising that awareness and that consciousness. What is the best I can do right now to honor those 4 things you just mentioned, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And
basically buying things for the long term, right? Not buying a piece of clothing that you're going to wear once to a party and then throw it away or give it away, I guess, give it to Goodwill. That's not a sustainable model for purchase of clothing. Sometimes it does cost a little more money to buy clothes that you want to wear, that you're going to wear for 10 years versus 1 year.
Yeah.
Or longer.
Thanks, Steve. Polly, you had a question too. I'll unmute you here.
Okay. One quick comment. A Grace over on Junction Road takes all kinds of things. That's a resale shop. And actually they benefit a Grace, which is the hospice. That's where I've started to go. But my question was, what happened to the building in Bangladesh? Is their construction so poor that it just fell in? Because that's something else that really needs to be addressed if they can't even be in a place that's safe. Do you know what happened to it, Carrie?
I mean, it was demolished. I don't know if it's been rebuilt. But
no, why did it fall in?
Yeah, there's been lots of discussion about that, and basically, like the codes and the engineering for Dhaka, which is right in the middle. Actually, it's right by the river in Bangladesh, but so that's good for trade, I guess. But I guess they just, like let it go, and there is this discussion out there around, there's paying off of the engineers and the code inspectors, and that occurs in some countries, and there's been some discussion that happened there. But frankly, the owners simply continued on with the manufacturing to honor those contracts, right, to those Western consumers to get their stuff without stopping the line to do the needed repairs. It's just
that seems to me to be. John was in construction, so that's kind of where, I first went when you talked about that factory. That all needs to be addressed too then.
Yeah, and I mean, there you go again. I mean, there again is an example of the cost. So when we're trying to maximize profits and minimize cost to the consumer, things like keeping our buildings safe for our employees.
Yeah.
Bob commented as we were watching the video how little metal there was in the rubble there of that building. There just were no big metal uprights standing as other stuff fell down.
I suspect the vibration of the machines caused failure of the concrete without metal structural supports within the concrete itself. So that's probably what took place.
Probably right.
That's why you have building codes here and they don't have them there.
Yeah.
Very, very good point. Eric had something.
Go ahead, Eric.
The tragedy in Bangladesh reminded me of a historical tragedy that you're probably familiar with, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York, 1911. There was a fire there. The factory was set up. They locked the doors so that people couldn't get out, when they were supposed to be working, and people couldn't come in. 146 people died, most of them women and children. That tragedy led to, I think, the formation or the strengthening of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. And I'm wondering whether there has been any move for unionization in Bangladesh among those workers.
There definitely is a movement. And there was some at Rana Plaza prior to this, but there was so much retribution. It was, you are going to get fired if you unionize. So there's been some progress there, Eric, and but it's not where it would be like in a developed country like the United States. So I think that's a good point. I also was doing research as to like how much production do you think we do of our own clothing here on the U.S. soil? Anybody? 90? We do 3%. 3% is here, and I was kind of looking into like why is that? Why is that? Well, I just gave you the average $3 a day for garment workers. In the U.S., it would be $16 a day. So it's not happening because, again, the American consumer is not paying $60 for a T-shirt. They want to pay $6 for a T-shirt. And so it's reshoring kind of garment workers. It's not going to work here because, again, we don't allow the exploitation of labor. At least society, since the shirtwaist factory and many other things, in the labor movement.
Yeah, I think it's $3 a day in Bangladesh and $16 an hour here, maybe $8.
Thank you. $16 an hour. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
It's substantially more.
Overconsumption is a problem. Waste is a problem. But let's say we stop buying clothing from Bangladesh. What happens to those workers there then? How much better off are they? Or are they better off? Or even worse off if they don't have those jobs?
Yep.
And so there's a reason why Bangladesh is the hotbed for the garment industry, because that's where the lowest wages are.
Yeah.
Okay, it didn't used to be that way. I mean, even if you start looking at your clothing, and when I ask you to start looking at your labels, you'll see that older clothing was from India, Vietnam, on and on. Now it's a lot of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And so where I was going with that is it's a race to the bottom. And so if we raise the total bottom, that's the idea. So if we could like raise the bottom for all garment workers, they're still employed. It's just we're changing the demand side in terms of, we remember, because only 400% growth in the last 2 decades. So what did we do prior to the 2 decades? How did our spending around garments and textiles impact the workforce then? So I'm wondering if we can raise the bottom for all garment workers, reduce consumption, and still have a higher quality of life. That's the puzzle, Eric. That's the puzzle.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. So I'm looking at the time. It's coming up on 12:30. I'm wondering if there are any last thoughts before we wrap up. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Carrie. I'm thrilled that you're part of the congregation and that you're able to be a leader here, and very much appreciate your ability to lead from home here. But yeah, seems like you have something pulled up ready to go. So I'll turn it over to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to close with this. And this is a 2004 Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech by Wangari Maathai. And she said, in the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to shed our fear and give hope to each other. That time is now. Well, she said that 16 years ago. And Jeff, your sermon was a little bit about, it was a lot about how do we work in times of fear? Where do we go in times of fear? And this fashion industry, it's scary. I mean, when we learn about this stuff, it brings tears to people's eyes. I just heard that. I mean, and that was just the clip, right? It brings tears to our eyes when we really try to connect with the people who are behind the things in our closet. But the time is now, and I think there's great hope. And there is a time when we need to shed our fear. I think now is the time. So I really encourage you to think about what you can do on an individual basis. And you can, that's the thing about this industry. You can do something in your own home, in your own closet, in your own lives that can make a big impact to other people's lives and to our planet. So with that, Jeff, would you want to close us out with just a prayer for today? And then we can call it a day.
I was muted. I'd be glad to. So I'll end the meeting after the prayer. Thank you. And next week, I believe we have Steve Wayland leading a conversation on one of the Beatitudes. So join us again, 11:30, and let us pray. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for this day, for the beauty of your creation and the goodness of your creation. We pray for one another and for all of our siblings, all of your creation, all of your people, that we may treat each other well, that we may treat each other with dignity, that we may afford the dignity to one another that you have afforded to all of us. We pray for the lost, the last, the least, for the exploited, for the oppressed, that they may find release, that they may find liberation, because you are a God who liberates people from bondage and oppression. As your hands and feet, may we be the actors that carry out your will on this world. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day and have a good week.